Sorry, Claire. We decided you're staying down there until you lose some weight. Maybe then we won't be so embarrassed to be seen with you.
Wait, what? Please, I'm starving. Please let me out.
Nope. Maybe going to bed hungry will speed up your metabolism, though.
Her laughter echoed through the door as she walked away, leaving me in the dark. I was furious, humiliated, and terrified. Did they really plan to leave me here? That night, I drank water from a tap in the basement just to feel full enough to sleep. The next morning, I called out again, hoping they'd come to their senses. Instead, Uncle Mike's voice greeted me through the door.
We're still deciding how long to keep you down there. Maybe a week, maybe 2. We'll see. Depends how quickly you lose weight.
Panic set in. I couldn't survive like this. I had to find a way out, especially since I didn't for sure when they would let me out. I began searching the basement for anything that could help me. Eventually, I found some old boxes and stacked them up to reach a small window near the ceiling. My name is Claire, and I've always known I was different from my sister Jessica. It's not just that we don't get along, we're practically opposites in every way. Jessica is pretty, thin, and effortlessly popular. People are drawn to her like moths to a flame. Me? I'm the nerdy one. I love school. I'm more than a little overweight, and I'd rather spend my Friday nights reading than going to parties. I guess being so different wouldn't be such a problem if Jessica didn't make it her personal mission to remind me of it every chance she got.
God, Claire, could you be any more of a loser? Who cares about your stupid grades? No one's impressed.
Mom and Dad care. Besides, not everyone can coast through life on their looks like you do.
Oh, please. You're just jealous because I don't have to try to get people to like me. People are naturally drawn to me, whereas they see you and are disgusted.
They are not.
Of course they are. You really don't know just how ugly you really are. You're such a freak.
That was Jessica. Every word out of her mouth was meant to cut me down, to make me feel small. And the worst part? It worked. I hated how she treated me, but I didn't know how to fight back. The only saving grace was our parents. They were my rock, kind, loving, and supportive. No matter how awful Jessica was to me, Mom and Dad were always there to remind me that I was special in my own way, and that they truly loved me, and that they knew that I would go far in life. But then, everything changed, and not for the better. It was a rainy afternoon when the police knocked on our door. Mom and Dad had been in a car accident and had been rushed to the hospital with severe injuries. Sadly, they didn't make it, and they passed away while doctors tried to save them. I can't even describe the pain of hearing those words. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Jessica cried, of course. But even in my grief, I could tell there was something hollow about it. She always knew how to put on a show, and this was no different. I really didn't think she was even capable of caring about anyone else other than herself. After the funeral, our aunt and uncle offered to take us in since they were childless. At first, I thought it would be okay, and that it would be a fresh start. They were polite and seemed genuinely kind, but that kindness didn't last long, at least not for me. From the beginning, it was clear they favored Jessica.
Jessica, you're such a beautiful young lady. We're so lucky to have you in our family.
With looks like that, you could be a model one day. Shame that Claire didn't get the same good looks. I guess every family has a black sheep.
I tried to impress them in my own way. I brought home straight A's, showed them awards I'd won, and even helped out around the house more than Jessica ever did. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. In fact, the more I did, the more they looked at me with disgust.
That's nice, Claire. But have you seen Jessica's new dress? Doesn't she look stunning?
School is fine and all, but you really should focus on losing a few pounds. You'd be much prettier if you tried, and people would like you far more. Don't you ever wonder how people must look at us as a family and see you and think poorly of us?
It's true. Your uncle, myself, and Jessica are beautiful people, and when our neighbors see you, they must wonder how someone fat and ugly could be related to us.
Their words hurt so much, and Jessica loved every second of it. She reveled in the attention they gave her and how cruel they were towards me. She made sure to rub it in my face whenever she could.
Face it, Claire. You'll never measure up to me. Just stop trying.
Life isn't about popularity or looks, Jessica. One day you'll be old and your looks will fade, but meanwhile, I'll still be smart and probably with a good job.
As if. I'll just marry some rich man and while you are breaking your back working. I'll be living the life of luxury.
Their favoritism turned into outright cruelty. This became more common because my uncle worked for a magazine, and sometimes, due to Jessica's beauty, he would use her for makeup advertisements, earning thousands of dollars. But because I was fat, I couldn't be used, and they saw me as a burden. While they showered Jessica with new clothes and jewelry, I was left with hand-me-downs and snide remarks. It was as if I didn't exist, just an afterthought, a burden they were forced to tolerate. Then came the night that everything fell apart. One evening, Uncle Mike came home from work with big news.
I've got an important client coming over for dinner tonight. He's actually the publisher of the best magazine in this state. This could be huge for my career, so I need everything to be perfect.
He turned to Jessica and smiled.
Jessica, make sure you wear something nice. We want to impress him, and seeing your beautiful face will definitely do just that.
Then his gaze shifted to me and his smile vanished and turned into a nasty sneer.
As for you, Claire, you're staying in the basement. I don't want you embarrassing us. I don't want my client to see your ugly face and think poorly of me because of it.
What? But
Don't argue with me. Just do as you're told.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but the look on his face told me it wouldn't matter. Defeated, I grabbed a couple of books and went down to the basement. Hours passed as I sat there, my stomach growling. I hadn't been allowed to eat dinner, and the hunger was unbearable. When I finally heard the front door close and realized the client had left, I made my way to the basement door, only to find it locked. I pounded on the door, calling for help. Hello? Somehow, the door got locked. Can someone please let me out?
Sorry, Claire. We decided you're staying down there until you lose some weight. Maybe then we won't be so embarrassed to be seen with you.
Wait, what? Please, I'm starving. Please let me out.
Nope. Maybe going to bed hungry will speed up your metabolism, though.
Her laughter echoed through the door as she walked away, leaving me in the dark. I was furious, humiliated, and terrified. Did they really plan to leave me here? That night, I drank water from a tap in the basement just to feel full enough to sleep. The next morning, I called out again, hoping they'd come to their senses. Instead, Uncle Mike's voice greeted me through the door.
We're still deciding how long to keep you down there. Maybe a week, maybe 2. We'll see. Depends how quickly you lose weight.
Panic set in. I couldn't survive like this. I had to find a way out, especially since I didn't for sure when they would let me out. I began searching the basement for anything that could help me. Eventually, I found some old boxes and stacked them up to reach a small window near the ceiling. It was too small for me to fit through, but it gave me an idea. I wrote a note explaining everything, how I'd been locked in the basement, starved, and tormented by my family. Then I searched for something to make my story more believable. That's when I found an old tape recorder. I set it up near the door and recorded myself calling out for help. Sure enough, Jessica, Aunt Susan, and Uncle Mike all came to mock me.
Keep crying, Claire. Maybe it'll help you burn some calories.
You'll thank us later. This is for your own good.
Stop whining. You'll get out when we say you can. For now, we'll keep you locked down there. Of course, if you happen to die, though, we'll just celebrate.
Yeah, I mean, we'll save so much money by not having to buy food for your fat ass.
Their voices were clear on the recording. I wrapped the cassette tape in my note and waited until the next morning. When I heard the neighbor heading to work, I pushed the window open and threw the bundle into their yard in front of them. I watched as they picked it up, read the note, and looked up at me in shock. Nervously, they tiptoed towards the house and spoke to me through the open window.
Is this true?
Yes. Please, help me, if you need proof. Please listen to the recording. They promised to call the police and ran off with the tape. Hours later, I heard sirens and the sound of officers pounding on the front door. There was shouting, arguing, and then gunfire. Moments later, the basement door burst open, and police officers rushed down to get me. They brought me to the neighbor's house, where I finally got to eat a proper meal while giving my statement. The officers explained what had happened.
When we arrived, your family claimed you weren't here. They said you'd run away. When we demanded to see the basement, your uncle threatened us with a gun. When we forcefully tried to get in, your uncle started shooting. One of our officers was forced to fire, and he was shot.
I later learned that Uncle Mike didn't survive his injuries and he died on the way to the hospital. Aunt Susan and Jessica were arrested and charged with wrongful imprisonment, child abuse, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Jessica, despite being a minor, was tried as an adult because of the seriousness of the crimes and her role in them. Weeks passed, and they were both sentenced to 20 years in prison each. With Aunt Susan gone, I was given ownership of their house, but as a minor, I couldn't live alone. The neighbor who had saved me, Rebecca, offered to adopt me. I'll never forget the day the court approved it. I was skeptical that it would be an improvement, but was so very relieved to find out that it was the best thing to ever happen to me.
You're safe now, Claire. I'll take care of you. I promise that I will protect and keep you safe.
For the first time in years, I felt truly loved. Rebecca treated me like her own daughter, and life with her was everything I'd ever dreamed of. I had no intention of ever living in my aunt and uncle's home, and so I sold it and used the money to pay for college, and with the money left over, I invested it. Years later, I used that money that had grown while I was in school, and I bought my own home and started a life I was proud of. As for my aunt and Jessica, I heard rumors that my uncle's ghost keeps tormenting them. Inmates despise them after learning how horrible they were, often bullying them, seizing their food, or occasionally beating them. The worst happened when Jessica tried to seduce a guard. It backfired and was locked up in solitary confinement, and her sentence was extended by 3 months. As for Jessica and Aunt Susan, I made a point to often write them letters, just to let them know how happy and successful I'd become without them. And sometimes I will include photos of my vacation trips. Maybe it was spiteful, but it always makes me smile rubbing their noses in the fact that they are stuck in prison while I get to live my best life. Thanks for watching. The moment I stepped outside, my blood ran cold. Ryan was standing over Georgia, gripping the handles of her wheelchair. He was pushing her.
Let me go!
Get out! You don't belong here. Who the hell invited you?
There were a few guests already present, but they didn't stop him, probably out of fear. William was across the garden, already storming toward us. But I didn't wait for him. I walked straight up to Ryan and slapped the living daylight out of him.
You idiot! How dare you slap me, huh? I was trying to be freaking nice and get this disabled person out of here, and what I get in return is a slap? Shut the hell up, Ryan. Do you even know who you just tried to throw out? Who cares? Why the hell would you let a cripple into your wedding? Do you want this cripple to be in your wedding pictures? That cripple is my wife's sister, and she has a name, Ryan. Her name is Georgia.
Ryan sneered and scoffed.
You're making a mistake marrying a cripple's sister. What if you end up having crippled children too?
You have some nerve, Ryan.
Georgia and I had been alone for years. We lost our parents when we were still young, too young to know how cruel the world could be. But we made it work. We had each other, and that was enough. I still remember the night she came home, face glowing, eyes bright with excitement.
Chloe, I met someone.
Oh? And? It was strange hearing her say that. Since her last relationship that ended over 3 years ago, she'd refused to date anyone.
He's wonderful. His name is Ryan. He's kind, funny. He treats me so well.
I wanted to be happy for her. Really, I did. But I was scared. Her last relationship hadn't ended well, and I couldn't help but feel scared about her new crush. Georgia had always been the softer one between us, the one who believed in fairy tales, who thought love could fix anything. I, on the other hand, had always been the skeptic. I hoped she wasn't mistaking the mysterious guy's behavior for something else, but she looked so happy, so I pushed those thoughts away. Then I'm happy for you, Georgia. It's been long enough. You deserve your happy ever after. I was happy when she grinned and threw her arms around me in a tight hug. If only I had known what was coming. For the first week after Georgia announced to me that they'd started dating, she looked so happy. I rarely saw her in bad moods again. She was always on the phone with him, smiling happily. However, I soon started to notice her withdrawing, as well as other new things, like a faint discoloration on her wrist one evening, a barely there bruise on her cheekbone the next week. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it, but then it got worse. One night, Georgia walked through the door, her lips split open, a deep purple mark stretching across her forearm. I stood frozen, my blood running cold. What the hell happened to you?
I tripped. It's nothing.
I knew that was a lie. Whenever Georgia lied, she refused to look me in the eyes. And that's what was happening. Over the past month, I'd noticed so many new changes. Georgia never used to flinch when I moved too fast. She never used to jump when I raised my voice. But now she was different. A week later, it happened again. This time, a dark bruise bloomed across her collarbone. And that was it. I had enough. I didn't ask her that night. I didn't have to. When she changed into her pajamas, I saw them. The handprints on her ribs, the deep scratches on her shoulders. I still didn't ask, until she returned home limping one day and rushed to her room. I marched into her room, already boiling. Tell me the truth, Georgia. Who's hurting you? I'm tired of seeing you like this every damn time.
It's nothing, Chloe. Stop worrying.
Don't lie to me, please. That seemed to be enough to make her break.
It's Ryan. He's always hitting me. Whether I do something or not, when he gets high, he just can't stop himself from hitting me.
I couldn't stomach it. Not only was he an abuser, he was also a drug addict. No way. I immediately told Georgia to break up with him. She agreed and promised to do so the next day. Unfortunately, after the confrontation, she never made it home the same because the Ryan guy wasn't the type to let go easily. She told me later, through tears, that he had exploded with rage. He threw her against the wall. He punched her. He didn't stop. And when she finally got away, she was barely holding herself together. She got in her car, trying to drive home, trying to get back to me. But her body was weak, so she fainted in the middle of driving and got hit by a truck. She didn't die, but she was left paralyzed from the waist down. She cried so much. I wanted to go arrest Ryan, but she refused to give me his house address or pictures, saying she was okay with him out of her life. It was sad, but I respected her decision. I spent 5 whole years taking care of my sister. She needed help with almost everything for the first 3 years. However, through therapy, she's been improving. She told me to relax one day and focus on my own life, because she felt bad to know that I'd refused relationships for those 5 years. It took a lot of convincing from her to finally get me to accept. It wasn't long before I met William. It had been so long since I let myself think about love. I had spent so much time focusing on Georgia that I had forgotten about myself. But William changed that. He was gentle, patient, understanding, and he loved me in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. He didn't even mind Georgia. In fact, he helped me with her whenever we needed help, majority of the time. We had been together for almost a year when he proposed to me. I was shocked because I hadn't expected it. I'd met his parents, but it was still shocking. I agreed to marry him, and we soon started planning the wedding, my sister helping as much as she could. The moment William told me his brother's name, I had a bad feeling. Ryan was a simple, common name, but I already held hatred for one stupid Ryan. This Ryan had spent 5 years abroad, William had said. 5 years since he last saw his family. The timeline made sense, but I told myself I was overthinking it. There were plenty of men named Ryan. It couldn't be the same one. The moment he arrived, I knew he was trouble. He didn't like me. That much was obvious. He criticized everything I did, my wedding dress, the catering, even the flower arrangements. But the worst argument we had was over something as stupid as the carpet color. I want it cream, not white.
That's ridiculous. White is more elegant.
It's my wedding, Ryan. I think I know what I want. Besides, I don't even remember asking your opinion. Imagine my shock when he raised his hand to hit me over that comment. Luckily, William was faster. He caught Ryan's hand and pushed him instead.
Try that again and I'll break your damn hand. You were about to hit my wife-to-be. Are you crazy?
Ryan stormed away in anger. After that, I avoided him. I didn't even tell Georgia. She had enough on her plate. I thought I could endure him until the wedding was over. Unfortunately, I had no idea what was coming. On my wedding day, while in my dressing room, I heard noises. I should have known something was wrong when I heard the commotion outside. At first, I ignored it. I had bigger things to focus on. Then I heard Georgia's voice, and I abandoned everything and ran out. The moment I stepped outside, my blood ran cold. Ryan was standing over Georgia, gripping the handles of her wheelchair. He was pushing her.
Let me go!
Get out! You don't belong here. Who the hell invited you?
There were a few guests already present, but they didn't stop him, probably out of fear. William was across the garden, already storming toward us. But I didn't wait for him. I walked straight up to Ryan and slapped the living daylight out of him.
You idiot! How dare you slap me, huh? I was trying to be freaking nice and get this disabled person out of here, and what I get in return is a slap? Shut the hell up, Ryan. Do you even know who you just tried to throw out? Who cares? Why the hell would you let a cripple into your wedding? Do you want this cripple to be in your wedding pictures? That cripple is my wife's sister, and she has a name, Ryan. Her name is Georgia.
Ryan sneered and scoffed.
You're making a mistake marrying a cripple's sister. What if you end up having crippled children too?
You have some nerve, Ryan.
He seemed to finally relax enough to recognize her voice. He also focused properly on her face, and I could see his shock.
Now you remember me? 5 years ago, this man here ruined my life. We used to be a couple, and he was so abusive. He would hit me mercilessly and without reason whenever he got high on drugs.
Everyone was shocked, especially William and their parents, while a few people nearby began recording videos.
On the day I broke up with him, he beat me so much that it left me bleeding. And because of him, I lost my legs. I fainted in the car and had an accident because of you, Ryan.
Murmurs spread. Faces turned toward Ryan in horror. I waited for him to deny it or say something, but for once, he had no words. Their father, who had been silent this whole time, finally moved and William followed. Without hesitation, he grabbed Ryan by the collar.
You're no son of mine. You're nothing but a beast.
In front of everyone, Ryan was dragged to the exit. Ryan struggled, but William shoved him hard. He tripped over his own feet and fell on his face, right in front of everyone. Laughter erupted. I was happy to see the humiliation burning across his stupid face. After he was flung out, William and his family all apologized to me and Georgia. Georgia said she had no issues with them because they were good people, unlike Ryan. We apologized to the guests, and the wedding continued. 2 weeks after the wedding, just as life was settling back to normal, tragedy struck. We all thought Ryan had returned to abroad. After what happened at the wedding, William and his father had made it clear. He was no longer a part of the family. No one heard from him. No one wanted to. But Ryan hadn't left. Videos of him acting foolishly had surfaced on the internet, portraying him as a lunatic. The video was flooded with horrible comments, fueling Ryan's anger and desire for revenge. One night, he broke into Georgia's house. We would later find out he had been watching her, waiting for the perfect moment. He wanted revenge, and in his twisted mind, the best way to get it was to take away the only home she had. So he set the house on fire. The flames spread quickly, engulfing the walls, the furniture, everything Georgia owned. He probably thought she was inside, asleep in her bed, helpless to escape. Maybe he imagined the fear on her face when she realized she couldn't run. Maybe he wanted her to suffer. But fate had other plans. Georgia wasn't home that night. She had been at the hospital, waiting for her therapist who had arrived late. If he had come on time, she would have been home. She would have been trapped. But Ryan was the one who got trapped instead because he hadn't realized that the door locked from the outside. By the time he tried to escape, it was too late. The fire raged around him, smoke filling his lungs. He screamed for help, but no one heard. He managed to call emergency services before collapsing. By the time firefighters arrived and put out the flames, Ryan was burned beyond recognition. He survived, but barely. When we got the news, William didn't flinch.
I don't care.
His parents didn't care either. They refused to see him. No one did. Ryan had made his choice. And now, he had to live, or die, with the consequences. Unfortunately, Georgia lost everything in the fire. Every picture, every piece of clothing, every little thing she had left from our parents. It wasn't fair. But William's father stepped up. As an apology, he bought her a new house and helped her with a fresh start. He even got her a remote job, better than her current one, to make life easier for her. Meanwhile, Ryan lay in the hospital, covered in bandages, in pain beyond imagination. He had money saved up, and that kept him alive. For a while. But then the money ran out and his family still refused to help. The hospital stopped his treatment. For 3 days, Ryan suffered. No medication, no comfort, just the raw, unbearable agony of burns consuming his body. On the fourth day, he died. His family didn't mourn or give him a proper burial. He didn't deserve it. 2 years later, Georgia met a man, a good man, one who saw her for who she was and cherished her despite her disability. They're married now and they have a child together. As for William and me, we have 3 kids now, and we never spoke of Ryan again. Thanks for watching. He was holding her hand tightly, almost crushing her little fingers to keep her from running to me. "How dare you hit a 10-year-old little girl?" I scream. Marina began to yell back at me, waving her arms angrily at me. With her arms in the air, her sleeves rolled down, and I saw her bare arms. They were covered in track marks, the telltale sign of a heroin user. "You degenerate drug addict. You're still using, aren't you?"
What? Oh no, you're accusing me of that, in my own house.
With that, she jumped at me and knocked me over. She grabbed my hair and hit my head repeatedly against the cold hardwood floor. I started to black out, too weak to fight her off of me. Suddenly, she was pushed off of me. First, I thought Mason had finally came to his senses and was the one fighting her. As I began to see again, I realized that he still stood at the foot of the stairs, just watching all of us. Kinsley had pushed her off of me. I quickly turned to look at Marina. She was leaning over Kinsley, her face red with anger. She was preparing to hit my poor daughter, when I hit her first, hard to her stomach with a bat I found in their hallway. She immediately fell to the floor, holding her stomach. Her groans finally made Mason move, and he rushed to her side. "My name is Audrey, and I thought my nightmare ended 4 years ago when I divorced my husband Mason. Unfortunately, it was just the start of another one. I filed for a divorce because I caught him sneaking around with another woman behind my back. Actually, my 10-year-old daughter Kinsley caught him. How horrible is it to discover your father with another woman and then have to tell your mother about it? I still feel so guilty for not seeing the signs sooner. I could have prevented her from going through that pain. Sometimes as a mother, you have to accept that you can't protect your child from everything. My therapist had to tell me that a lot after the divorce." Shortly after the divorce was finalized, Mason publicly announced the woman that he had been cheating on me with to be his girlfriend. Her name was Marina. Marina and Mason. Of course, I was humiliated, but I kept it to myself. The only contact that I had with him was when I dropped Kinsley off at his house for the 1 weekend a month that he got her. In the court hearings, he didn't get full custody, but a weekend visitation. I wasn't happy with it, but I still wanted my daughter to have some relationship with her father, even if he was a lying, cheating scumbag. He's still her father, after all. My therapist had to convince me of the importance of their relationship, despite how angry I still was with him. After some time, though, I realized that something weird was happening when Kinsley would go to visit her father. She would come back silent and would barely talk or look at me. She would only wear long sleeves that covered her arms and legs. This happened for several weeks before I finally decided to talk to her about it. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You always look so sad whenever you come back from your father's house."
It's his girlfriend. She's mean to me, bosses me around, and makes me do hard chores around the house.
"Well, you need to do chores sometimes, sweetie." "But she's mean to you?"
Yeah. I'm scared of her. She hits me sometimes too.
"What? Have you told your dad about this?"
Yeah, and he doesn't care. He keeps saying it's just my imagination, and I'm lying because she's not you.
It all started to make sense. Whenever I would drop Kinsley off, I would see her tense up as if she was afraid. I already didn't like Marina, much less trust her, after she ruined my marriage. But this an entirely different matter. My daughter's safety would always come before any personal issues I have with someone. I told Kinsley that I would talk to her father and get things straightened out for her. I called Mason that evening and talked to him. "Do you know what your daughter said to me? She said that she doesn't feel safe in your house because of your girlfriend. She told me that she hits her."
I wish she would have said something to me about it. I promise you, everything is fine over here, and she's in perfectly safe hands when she's with me. A little discipline never hurt anybody.
"How can I trust you not to lie? You've lied to me before about Marina. Our divorce ringing any bells?"
A little discipline and hard work won't hurt anybody. You should be thanking me that she's getting it somewhere. You're just trying to start trouble so that you can take away what little time I get to have with my daughter. I won't let you take her from me, Audrey. I love Marina now. Get over it.
I hung up the phone. I was tired of talking to him. He clearly wasn't listening. That was just the first of many phone calls that I had with him. Each time I tried to ask him more about Marina, he wouldn't tell me anything, and kept telling me that Kinsley was fine, that she was only lying so that she could go back home to spend more time with me. You are the favorite parent after all, Audrey. She's 10. I wouldn't put it past her. I gave up trying to reason with him. If I was going to protect my daughter, I needed to do some snooping of my own. I couldn't keep Kinsley from seeing her father, but I could get her a better phone so she had a more reliable way to contact me if anything happened while at his house. I put off the monthly visitation for as long as I could, waiting until the very last weekend of the month. There were a few times where I was in the driveway of their house, and I could hear the two of them screaming at each other before I dropped her off. I felt so uneasy about the whole situation, but I really couldn't do anything about it. I did my best to be patient, and gathered as much information as I could. I talked to Mason's neighbors about the two of them, and they said that they've had to call the police a couple of times to file noise complaints. Apparently, a few weeks prior, the two of them had gotten into a huge fight with each other. It ended with Marina pushing Mason down a flight of stairs. He didn't press any charges, so nothing changed about their situation. I also found out that Marina had a past of drug addiction. When I talked to Mason about it, he swore up and down that she had been clean and sober for years. In January, I tried to do my usual of waiting until the last week of the month for Kinsley to visit her dad, but I got really sick. I kept fainting and was too lightheaded to even walk. I had to make a tough decision. I couldn't take care of Kinsley while I was sick like this. Against my better judgment, I called Mason and asked him to come pick up Kinsley, and he did. She had been gone for roughly 4 hours before she called me. She was panicking, whispering into the microphone.
Mom, I know you're sick, but I really want to come home. Marina hates me for no reason, Mom.
Why? What happened?
Marina made me make dinner like she usually does. And when I sat down to eat with them, she screamed that I shouldn't be sitting at the table with them at all. She hit me really hard, knocking the sauce on my plate all over the floor.
She hit you?
Yeah.
Where's your father? Did you tell him about what's going on?
Yes, but he said she was just disciplining me. I started crying and couldn't stop, so he locked me in this closet. It's so dark and I'm really scared, Mommy.
In the background of the call, I heard Marina screaming at the top of her lungs.
You naughty little sack of crap! I told you not to use that stinkin' phone in there. Your stupid father should have taken that away from you. Let's see how well it works when I smash it to bits.
I had read stories of mothers performing crazy feats of strength when their child was in trouble. I could only imagine it before, but this was the moment where I experienced it firsthand. Mason lived 2 hours away. As sick I was, I drove to go pick up my daughter that night. It didn't matter that I didn't have enough strength to change out of my pajama pants anymore. Fighting against the nausea and the dizziness was almost too easy because I was filled with so much anger. I sped the whole way there. I busted through the door. Marina came around the corner of the living room and began screaming at me. Mason came down the stairs holding Kinsley's hand. At first glance, it might have looked like a loving father providing support for his daughter in a scary situation, but I knew better. He was holding her hand tightly, almost crushing her little fingers to keep her from running to me. "How dare you hit a 10-year-old little girl?" I scream. Marina began to yell back at me, waving her arms angrily at me. With her arms in the air, her sleeves rolled down, and I saw her bare arms. They were covered in track marks, the telltale sign of a heroin user. "You degenerate drug addict. You're still using, aren't you?"
What? Oh no, you're accusing me of that, in my own house.
With that, she jumped at me and knocked me over. She grabbed my hair and hit my head repeatedly against the cold hardwood floor. I started to black out, too weak to fight her off of me. Suddenly, she was pushed off of me. First, I thought Mason had finally came to his senses and was the one fighting her. As I began to see again, I realized that he still stood at the foot of the stairs, just watching all of us. Kinsley had pushed her off of me. I quickly turned to look at Marina. She was leaning over Kinsley, her face red with anger. She was preparing to hit my poor daughter when I hit her first, hard to her stomach with a bat I found in their hallway. She immediately fell to the floor, holding her stomach. Her groans finally made Mason move, and he rushed to her side. I grabbed Kinsley's hand, spat on their floor, and ran out the house. In the driveway, we called the police. When they arrived, they talked with the four of us. They lied, claiming that Marina never attacked us. Thankfully, the officer only had to take one look at my swollen and bloody face to tell that they were lying. The injuries were to the back of my head, and there was a little dent in the floor from where she banged my head onto the floor. Fortunately, I was able to protect Kinsley from being attacked again. With the police report and the Child Protection Services report, there was enough evidence to punish the two of them, despite all of their blatant lying. Mason lost all custody of Kinsley and had to pay a crazy expensive fine for child endangerment. It was such a large fine that he couldn't pay it all before the deadline. This happened for months, and the interest fees got larger and larger until he couldn't even make a dent in how much he owed. His solution was to try to sell some of the heroin that Marina had left behind. In a drug deal that went wrong, he tried to trick someone into paying 3 times more money than he should have, and the buyer caught on. The man was so angry that he crippled Mason's right hand with a pipe, the same hand that he used to try to keep Kinsley from running to me that night. Marina was found guilty of child abuse for beating Kinsley, and was sent to prison for 10 years. For the first few weeks after the trial, she had to stay in the hospital before being transferred to the prison. When I had hit her with the bat, it had cracked a couple of her ribs. She stayed in the state hospital for months before being transferred to the prison's hospital. When she finally got there, she ended up still being a danger, just to herself this time. She turned to other inmates to be her source for drugs and alcohol while she was in prison. Apparently, someone had taught her how to make wine in the toilet, but she had missed a crucial step and ended up severely poisoning herself and died in the prison's infirmary. As for me and Kinsley, without those two psychos in our lives, we were finally able to live together in peace. My brother had heard of the fiasco that had happened with her father and volunteered to step in Kinsley's life so that she could have a positive male role model. It's made such a difference. He's been helping me with chores around the house, supporting Kinsley with school, and even helps out with our finances. I've never seen Kinsley happier in her life, and seeing her happy makes me happy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
Sick? I don't care. You're coming with me this minute. Before I knew what was happening, the man lifted me effortlessly and threw me on his right shoulder. Immediately, he left my house, ignoring my cries of pain. We arrived at the company, and I was carried to the marketing department. He dumped me on my seat. "Start working!" I had no idea how to react. I found myself typing. However, with each second that passed, I was getting weaker. A few minutes later, I blacked out. The next time I opened my eyes, I realized I was at the hospital. I received my letter of dismiss there, and I couldn't be happier. I chose being jobless over getting killed by having a job. Two years ago, I got a job at a famous chocolate-making company. Before then, I'd used 2 whole years searching for jobs around after finishing college. It was a trying period, and I was desperate to do any job I got. When I got the job at the company as one of the marketers, I was overjoyed. I screamed and jumped in happiness, as it was my dream to be a marketer. That company? Bro, can you cope there? When I announced the news to my friends, they had quite a lot to say about the manager. Apparently, 2 out of my 3 friends knew people who'd worked there and had to leave because of the man. My cousin had to attend therapy sessions for 6 months to get over what he did to her. He's a cruel asshole. No one can report him because he's also very manipulative. Even more, the owner trusts him completely, and everyone he's bullied knows it's a waste of time to try reporting him. The whole thing sounded weird and unbelievable. I mean, there's no way 3 people would report him, and all 3 would be termed liars. Also, couldn't they think of a way to get evidence to prove that the man was evil as they claimed? I concluded that their stories were stupid. I was going to take the job and see for myself if the man was as ruthless as they claimed. I resumed the next day. The first person I encountered was a man with a very good build. He was tall and very muscular. He also had a few strands of gray in his hair. I could see everyone who passed him, bowing their heads to greet him. I immediately concluded that he was the CEO of the company. I was about to approach him when I was stopped by his sudden yell. "How dare you drop my bag? You're fired! Fuck out of here this minute!" I was shocked. The worker behind him, who I hadn't noticed earlier, had accidentally dropped his bag. I was confused on how he could fire her for that. Another worker, without being told, quickly approached them and took the bag from the lady. Afterward, she turned and walked out in tears. I stood in shock and watched as the man made his way in. Once he got to the elevator, everyone moved away, giving him space. When the elevator opened, those inside quickly rushed out, giving him the chance to use it alone. A thought crossed my mind about him being the manager my friends told me about, but I shook it off. There was no way a manager could have that much authority. Once he'd left in the elevator, the workers heaved a collective sigh. It was obvious that they were scared of him, from their body movements and facial expressions. I approached one of them. "Hi, bro. I just got employed yesterday and it's my first day at work." "Who was that man from earlier?" "That's Mr. William. He's the manager here. In anything you do, avoid him. Even the slightest mistake will make him fire you. He just fired our best marketer for accidentally dropping his bag." Hearing that made me both shocked and scared. My friend's stories were slowly starting to seem true. The man was indeed cruel. However, I hadn't even started working yet. I couldn't give up so soon. As I stepped into the elevator with some colleagues, I resolved within myself to avoid the man as much as I could. Even if I did come across him, I would make sure to do everything I could to not make any mistakes. I walked into the marketing department, and the head of the team approached me. I was assigned to my desk and given the rulebook. I was also given some things to type out. However, the man instructed me to go through the rulebook first, before doing anything. Going through it, my mouth hung open. The rules were outrageous. First, we had no sick leave. How could sick leaves be canceled? I left my seat and went to the leader. "I'm sorry, but it says here that there's no sick leave. How's that possible?" "Well, the manager canceled that for marketers. We have to ensure our chocolate is leading in the markets. We ensure to not fall sick. However, when we do, we treat ourselves here at work." The whole thing didn't seem normal to me. What if it's a serious case and you have to go to a hospital? Well, we make sure it doesn't get to that point by going for a full-body checkup monthly. Please, return to your seat and finish reading. We have a lot to do. After work that day, though it was too stressful. I returned home very tired and unable to even take my night bath. I fell asleep immediately my body touched my bed. The next morning, I was forced to wake up by 6 a.m., have a quick bath, and put on any outfit my hands chose. I had to be at work by 7:30 a.m. I left home around 7 a.m. and quickly got a cab that dropped me at work 5 minutes before the set time. That day was the beginning of my life in hell. I thought I'd be able to excuse myself and get breakfast, but I wasn't allowed. The permission to eat was only from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. I hadn't had dinner the previous night. The thought of not having breakfast, too, broke my heart. I managed to work until it was lunchtime. I felt my energy return after lunch, but it all went away by the time I was done for the day. My body was stiff, and the most stressed out it had ever been. However, when I got home, I didn't make the mistake to sleep off immediately, no matter how sleepy I was. I got my clothes for the next day out and had dinner before I finally slept. The next day, I woke even earlier, had a quick bath, got dressed, fixed breakfast for myself before leaving. My life continued that way, each day coming with even more stress. I could barely see my friends anymore. The only day of the week which I was free, I used it to sleep to my satisfaction. I was getting drained, and I knew it. I always had to down pills for headaches and body pains. I would leave, but I was scared of going back to being jobless. Those 2 years I spent being jobless were horrible. However, having a job wasn't even any better. The only advantage I had was the high payment I received bi-weekly. I knew they paid so much to keep the workers tied to them. For 2 months, I managed to avoid the manager. However, in my 3rd month of working, life happened, and I was forced to finally face him. We'd been working on a new way to push our product even higher, and we finally found a way, We needed to have a meeting with the manager for finalization. I dreaded the day until it finally came.
And who are you, lanky boy? Are you new here?
Before going to work at the company, I was quite fleshy. However, the stress and everything that came from the job had caused me to lose weight so much that I had become lanky with bulgy eyes. Yes, sir. I began working here 3 months ago.
Oh, come up here and open the meeting then.
I'd expected that. The leader had informed me prior that he'd want to test my capacity by doing that. However, I was advised again, making my opening perfect. I had to make a mistake to give him something to correct me about. If it were perfect, I'd be targeted by him and tortured verbally until I had to leave the company. He hated to see people better than him. I followed the advice and didn't go overboard. Of course, he had a correction. He yelled while correcting me, but I didn't mind. The meeting was filled with so much yelling and insults, but he finally accepted our idea. I later got to know that he was simply yelling to make us feel our idea was good, but not up to his taste, and he was only agreeing to it because he pitied us. It was crazy. Fast forward to my 6th month. I was getting even worse. I developed insomnia, bad posture, etc. I even began losing my hair rapidly as a result of how stressed I was. Regardless of what I saw the job doing to my health, I didn't quit. One day, my body gave up on trying to hold it in, and I fainted in my room. Fortunately, I woke up a few minutes later. I knew it would be a suicide attempt to go to work that day. I would call the company, but I realized I hadn't had the time to exchange contact with anyone in my department. I decided to receive treatment that day and resume work the next day. Weakly, I reached for my phone and called my personal doctor. He promised to be at my house in an hour. I managed to leave my bed and get a cup of tea while watching TV and waiting for my doctor's arrival. However, 30 minutes later, I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Though my doctor had arrived earlier, so I forced myself up and went to get the door. However, I was shocked to see the manager standing in front of me. I moved back in fear, and he followed me.
How dare you skip work, huh?
Sir, I'm sick.
Sick? I don't care. You're coming with me this minute.
Before I knew what was happening, the man lifted me effortlessly and threw me on his right shoulder. Immediately, he left my house, ignoring my cries of pain. We arrived at the company, and I was carried to the marketing department. He dumped me on my seat.
Start working!
I had no idea how to react. I found myself typing. However, with each second that passed, I was getting weaker. A few minutes later, I blacked out. The next time I opened my eyes, I realized I was at the hospital. I received my letter of dismiss there, and I couldn't be happier. I chose being jobless over getting killed by having a job. It didn't end there. Once I was discharged, I filed a case of emotional abuse, assault, and physical abuse on workers. I managed to get the previous workers to come in as witnesses, and they agreed, as they were also tired of his wickedness. And I also found nearly all of the previous workers he'd assaulted, and the case was taken to court. The CEO was shocked to see the video of him carrying me out of my house against my wish, which was caught by my CCTV cameras. He was even more shocked by the testimonies of all the workers, which were nearly 100. The court sentenced him to 10 years imprisonment with hard labor. All of his money and investment were also shared between all affected workers, leaving his family who depended on him with nothing. His wife was furious after finding out how horribly her husband had been treating workers and filed for divorce. The CEO also gave me my job back. Due to how well I'd performed at work, more than the old workers, I was promoted to the post of the marketing leader. I didn't think the punishment was enough for the manager, so I went to visit him in prison and told him of my new position. I could see how angry he looked, but I just laughed before I left. I paid some of the wardens to torture him for a week straight. The next week, when I visited again, I was happy to see the marks and injuries all over his body. I'm sure by the time he is out of there, he will be more humble. The company became a safe and enjoyable place to work at. We later heard my boss was nicknamed the Wicked Boss by other inmates and was bullied in prison, and occasionally his food will be seized by other inmates. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. On that day, The only people present were I and Gloria, her parents, and his teachers. In the middle of the funeral, however, someone suddenly burst into the cemetery. I turned and was shocked to see the manager. "Why are you here, sir?"
You must be stupid for asking me that. Did I give you the permission to leave your work to bury God knows whatever it is you're burying?
How dare you say that about my son?
Is the dead thing more important than your job? Huh, you idiot.
I was filled with rage and ordered him to leave, but he refused.
You're either going to stop this rubbish you're doing now and come with me, or be prepared to lose your job.
In anger, I told him to do whatever he wanted. I told him to fire me if he wanted, and I didn't care. He still wasn't having it. He tried to grab my arm and lift me up, but I pushed him off. Everyone was in shock. When he punched me, all hell let loose. My father-in-law immediately contacted the police as I and some of the guys around pounced on him and began to beat him up mercilessly. By the time the police arrived, he already had a broken lips, nose, and other injuries. He was immediately arrested and taken away. Hello, I'm Thane Jason, and I'm 35 years of age. I lost my parents to the cold hands of death 15 years ago, and a few months after their death was when I met Gloria, my present wife. I hadn't finished college yet, and my job as a part-time waiter was barely able to completely foot my bills. Gloria's parents were very wealthy and kind-hearted people. When they heard from their daughter that I didn't have a good job or enough money to even take care of my school expenses, they spoke to me about wanting to help me further my education. I couldn't believe my ears. I was already making plans to drop out, as the load was too much on me. I felt like I was dreaming when they took my bank details and sent me the money to clear all school bills for the year, and also extra for my feeding. I was amazed. I thanked them non-stop. I eventually graduated from college, 3 years later, at age 23. By then, Gloria was in her final year. So once I was out, I began searching around for jobs. I wanted to get married to Gloria with my money. I also didn't want to work under her father or get the job from any of his friends. I searched around for 3 whole weeks before I finally got a job at a paper editing company. I passed the interview and got employed. The pay wasn't large, but it was comfortable. When I told Gloria about it, she was overjoyed. I worked at the company for over 5 years before I had to move again to a different company with a slightly higher pay. By the time I was 30, we already had a son aged 5. Jack was our world, and we both worked hard to give him whatever he wanted. He was born with a condition that made his brain develop slower than other kids, but we didn't mind. We were going to be patient with his slow development. One day, Jack needed to be taken to the hospital for his regular checkup. Gloria had to go to work very early, and it was impossible for me to skip my work. I called Gloria's parents, but they were both unavailable. Jack usually had severe back and head pains that needed to be avoided by injecting a special drug into him every 3 weeks. I knew if he didn't go to the hospital that day, our son's pain was going to affect the whole neighborhood. I didn't want that to happen. Quickly, I fetched my phone and called one of my closest work friends. He picked up and asked why I wasn't at our workplace yet. I explained the situation to him and begged him to help tell our boss that I was going to be a little late. He agreed and even asked me to take my time with Jack. I was grateful to him, and with a relieved heart, took my son to the clinic. After about 2 hours, I was on my way to my workplace. However, the scene I was met with wasn't what I'd expected.
How dare you, Thane? You've kept everyone at work standstill because of your absence, and you didn't even give a reason to be absent.
Shocked, I turned to my friend who I'd asked to help speak to my boss, and he looked away. Turning to my boss, I explained it all to him and also told him how I'd contacted my friend to speak to him, since no worker had his number. Well, long story short, both my friend and I were fired. Me, for obvious reasons, and my friends, for intentionally not telling my boss about it because he wanted me gone, thereby obstructing completion of work for the day. I was down and disappointed. For another whole year, I searched for jobs everywhere, but couldn't get one. Luckily for us, Gloria's job was good enough, so we were able to feed well with her money. In the middle of the second year, luck shined on me, and I got a job. It was as an assistant manager in an automobile company. I could have never imagined myself getting the job. I was shocked when I passed the interview so easily. On my way out of the building after the interview, the lady at the front desk stopped me.
Did you pass?
Yes, I did. I'm gonna be the new manager.
I see how happy you are. I hope that smile remains on your face in the coming weeks.
I didn't understand what she meant, but I thanked her and continued my way out. I broke the news to my wife and her parents, and they were equally elated. My father-in-law knew the company, as he was friends with the CEO. However, he said something quite worrisome to me.
I've heard about people quitting very quickly from the company. I have no idea about their reason, but I hope you last there. Congratulations, son.
Anyway, I shrugged any negative thoughts off. I wasn't going to let anything kill my excitement. The next week, I resumed working as the assistant manager of the company. It wasn't as stressful as I'd imagined. It seemed as though the manager was barely around, the reason for an assistant. I did my job as I should, for a week straight, hoping to meet the manager soon. Eventually, he showed up after a week and 3 days. He was a middle-aged man and always kept a frown on his face. When I met him and introduced myself to him, he waved me off dismissively and asked me to do my job and not try to get familiar with him.
I'm your boss. You mustn't try to top me, okay? Don't smile while I'm around and always bow to me.
His words sounded quite weird. I mean, I clearly wasn't trying to overpower him or anything. There was no point in trying to scare me off. Anyway, I played along and simply agreed to everything he said. In the next 2 weeks, I needed no one to tell me the reason the previous workers left. The man was a bully. Whenever we were having meetings, everyone was thrown into a state of panic. There would be visible sweat on their forehead. I could also see most quivering. Every time there was a meeting, he fired one or more people. Some for coming a minute late, some for breathing too loudly. One time, he even fired someone for coughing while he was speaking. Sir, it's quite hard to hold a cough. I don't think he would cough out loud if he could hold it in. Please, forgive him. I tried to beg on the young man's behalf, since he'd only started working at the company 2 days ago.
One more word from you, Thane, and you're going to get fired too.
I had no choice but to be silent. I wasn't ready to begin another round of job hunting. 2 months later, Jack suddenly fell sick. It was so bad that in a space of 2 weeks, it had rendered him crippled. My wife had to quit her job to stay at the hospital and look after him after he was admitted. Even though my heart was heavy with worry, I had to keep working. I couldn't afford to be jobless again. I had to be strong for my family. Jack's sickness got worse. No matter how the doctors tried, they just couldn't point out the exact thing that was going on with him. It even got to a point where he could no longer speak. My wife and I were devastated. Her parents took him to the best hospital, all of us hoping for him to get better as quickly as possible. A month later, I received even more devastating news.
I'm afraid we might have to start feeding him through a feeding tube.
Gloria cried all day. Slowly, our son got even worse. After 2 months of being in the hospital, he died. We lost Jack. I saw my whole world crumble in front of me. I cried my eyes out, but Gloria cried even more. There was no way we could be comforted. He was our only child, the light of our small world. Sadness filled our hearts. Gloria didn't want him going to the morgue. Even though she was in deep pain, she wanted him to be laid to rest quickly after suffering so much. I requested a 3-day leave from work to mourn and bury my son. I'd requested it from the CEO, as I knew the manager would likely not agree to it. The man granted me 2 weeks to have enough time to mourn my son. I was grateful. We quickly prepared his funeral. On that day, the only people present were I and Gloria, her parents, and his teachers. In the middle of the funeral, however, someone suddenly burst into the cemetery. I turned and was shocked to see the manager. "Why are you here, sir?"
You must be stupid for asking me that. Did I give you the permission to leave your work to bury God knows whatever it is you're burying?
How dare you say that about my son?
Is the dead thing more important than your job? Huh, you idiot.
I was filled with rage and ordered him to leave, but he refused.
You're either going to stop this rubbish you're doing now and come with me, or be prepared to lose your job.
In anger, I told him to do whatever he wanted. I told him to fire me if he wanted, and I didn't care. He still wasn't having it. He tried to grab my arm and lift me up, but I pushed him off. Everyone was in shock. When he punched me, all hell let loose. My father-in-law immediately contacted the police as I and some of the guys around pounced on him and began to beat him up mercilessly. By the time the police arrived, he already had a broken lips, nose, and other injuries. He was immediately arrested and taken away. After the funeral, I contacted the CEO and told him about the situation. I also called some of the workers. It was time to stop his evil behaviors toward us. Together with Gloria and her parents, we all gathered at the police station. After hearing what he did to me, what he'd done to the previous employees, and all he'd been doing to us workers, the CEO was shocked. I pressed charges against him for disrupting my son's funeral and hitting me. He was also charged with bullying and harassment of employees. He was fired and also sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. Also, he was made to compensate us monetarily. I completed my 2 weeks leave, comforting my wife and myself. Afterward, I resumed working. A new manager was also employed. However, I wasn't satisfied with the punishment the manager was receiving. After thinking deeply about a punishment that was best, I finally found one. Secretly, I paid some officers to get the bad guys in prison to gang up on him and give him a permanent injury. And it happened. He was beaten so badly that he ended up being paralyzed from his waist downward and had to be confined to a wheelchair. I was fortunate enough to receive evidence of him cheating on his family and videos of him bullying staff from an anonymous sender. I knew it would be an old worker, but I didn't bother to look into it. I posted all online and paid influencers to make it go viral. The CEO caught on that I was behind the posting, but he didn't care. He also thought the manager deserved it. I visited him in jail to show him all the bad comments people were making about him, and he was purely devastated. His family were ashamed of him and completely cut him off, leaving him all alone. I was satisfied afterward and moved on with my life. Gloria got pregnant after 1 year and birthed our daughter. We miss our son, but we're happy we finally have another child. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.